Windy Point Jane Doe, identified as Susan Hobbs. Susan was a licensed practical nurse and she'd lived in California since the age of 11. She moved at the age of 41 to Lakewood, Washington, in the summer of 1991, with a woman who was described as a possible roommate. She was excited to purchase a trailer in 1992 at the age of 44. It was the first time she'd owned her own home. A male acquaintance would eventually join them in this home. While she was far from where she originated, she made sure to stay in contact with her family. And because owning her first home was such a big deal to Susan, it was really puzzling when she just abandoned it. When the owner of the mobile home park stopped by to pick up June's lot rent, the door to the home was standing wide open. Garbage was strewn everywhere, and the drawers were pulled open. It appears Susan and her two roommates had abandoned the home. While Susan's family originated in California, she had an aunt and uncle there in Washington, and they were alarmed. They were in contact with Susan all of the time. Susan lived a pretty mellow life, according to them. They wouldn't describe her as being high risk for this kind of thing to happen. So what happened to her? They said they began knocking on doors and asking if anyone had seen her. Whatever they found out was described as disturbing, the details of which have been held back. We do know that her family placed a classified ad as a result, saying her father is critically ill and asking for Susan to call them. Sadly, no call ever came. It's known that Susan was 44 when she was last seen, on August 9, 1993, in Lakewood, Washington. It's reported that for some reason she left in a hurry with two others, though if the identity of those two individuals are known, it hasn't been released. She seemingly disappeared into thin air. Her family hired a private investigator, but her location was never found. What they didn't know was on July 7, 1997, hikers found Susan's skull 1,300 miles away in Windy Point, Colorado. A woman called the Forest Service to say that she'd found a skull and mandible at Windy Point. This was found near the Smokehouse Campground, which was located off Forest Road. An in-depth search would be done, and enough bones were recovered to lead them to believe the woman stood 5 foot 6 inches tall, and it would later be discovered this was accurate, as Susan was in fact 5'6" and 115 pounds in life. Her skull held some clues, such as gold crowns and an assessment that she had a condition known as the temporal mandibular syndrome, meaning she experienced facial pain due to how her muscles, bones, and joints worked in conjunction with each other. This is commonly known as TMD. The Windy Point Jane Doe also suffered from scoliosis. They guessed she was likely 35 to 40. They did find some hair and a piece of her belt, leading them to think she was either a brunette or a redhead. They don't know what the cause of death was, and it was ruled undetermined, with a belief that the circumstances meant it was homicide. Scavengers had caused a lot of damage to the bones. There was a recreation done, and the first DNA profile on Susan was done in 2009. Unbeknownst to investigators, Susan Hobbs had actually been added to the NamUs database in 1993. In defense of those investigating, Susan's scoliosis wasn't even reported in the listing at all on NamUs. Even worse, her file was input in 1993 originally and cleared in April of 1994. So while it was in NamUs, there's no way they were ever going to find her. It was input and cleared before she was ever found. There are so many factors that leave people hidden and trapped in a place where their identity is unknown. Some were cremated, some were buried, but they were buried in a place they weren't supposed to be. They exhumed them multiple times, which is expensive, and the DNA pulled from these individuals in the past often aren't capable of being run through a genealogy database, so they end up re-exhuming, and the cost runs all over again. That was the case for Susan. They had her DNA, but they couldn't run it through the genealogical website, and the cost was about $5,000 for this jurisdiction. In this case, they reported being able to afford it, but in many jurisdictions, that's not the case, and crowdfunding usually happens. The cost is often too much for them. So if you're interested in helping with a case like this, there are various ways that you can donate. You can go to the DNA Doe Project and pick what case you would like to fund. Or you can use Amazon Smile every time you buy from Amazon and pick the DNA Doe Project like I did. You have to be sure, though, when you order that you're actually on the Smile website. That's Amazon's out. Regular Amazon purchases are not part of Amazon Smile. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and I'll help. As for the original DNA uploaded for Susan, CODIS had no matches. In this case, it was not until eventually loading her DNA into the commercial database that it matched her brother and sister, who were already in GEDmatch. It's often not this easy. As I mentioned earlier, a private investigator had been looking for her, and it was this investigator who was alerted when her siblings' DNA finally got a hit. The investigator was behind uploading to GEDmatch, which was a smart move. Private investigator Amy Johnson originally believed the Colorado number that called her to be spam, and then she heard the message. She had been looking for more than 20 years for Susan, and the message alerted her that the identity of the Montrose County's Windy Point Jane Doe was in fact Susan, and it was that GEDmatch entry that helped identify her. For that PI, Susan always mattered. She had been doing a favor for the family as a newly minted PI, as she had been in a relationship with one of Amy's relatives. She was never paid for this case, and she recently spoke to the press saying that bringing justice to Susan was always her goal. The fact that she's been found is the best outcome based on circumstances, she said. I've never forgotten about her. Even 20 years later, her picture hangs in a place where I see her. I've always thought, where are you? She had been following possible leads all these years, since 2003. Sadly, in this case, she still isn't going home, because homicide is still suspected as the cause of death, and the case is active. Therefore, they cannot release her bones. Hopefully, however, it gives her siblings some sort of peace to know what happened to their sister. Amy said it was all for Susan. She was an amazing person. She got tangled up with the wrong people. Nobody wants their family member on the side of a hill. This woman was a kind and gentle soul. She didn't deserve it. Susan's case is still under investigation. Susan went unidentified for nearly 28 years. The Baltimore Jane Doe 2021. Somebody took this woman to urgent care in Baltimore, Maryland, but didn't even check her in. Instead, they put her in a wheelchair and took off. She had no identification and died while still in the hospital. Usually there is a post-mortem photo in a case like this, but in this case, the reconstruction here is the only picture. She was 5'3" and only 93 pounds, which is pretty underweight for her height. They believe she was about 60 years old or older, which is a date of birth around 1961 or before. If anyone has any information on this case, please call the number on your screen. The Baltimore Jane Doe 2021 has gone unidentified for 1 year. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. If you could help to get the channel noticed by the YouTube algorithm by liking and leaving a comment, even if you can just leave a thumbs up or some emoji, it counts as engagement. It would be so appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. Thanks everyone. Take care of yourselves and each other.